So 1989 meant a revolutionary change for the communist countries in Central and Eastern Europe. What did it mean for the radios, for Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe?
1989 actually started a couple of years earlier because things started changing. Of course, in the Soviet Union with Gorbachev, jamming, a technical interference with the broadcast ended in December of 1988. And in some of the East European countries, Central and East European countries, people lost their fear, actually, and they spoke out. And for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, especially in Poland, people started sending in their own reports, being interviewed on the telephone in their own voices, which they would never have dared to do before. So all that happened starting in end of 1987, 1988. Already in, the fall of 1988, the RFRL president, Jean Pell, took a first trip to Hungary. Before 1988, it was unthinkable that anybody from the radio, whether official or journalists, could travel in Eastern Europe. So things, the ice was melting, ice was breaking up, things were changing. And that just advanced very much in 1989. Momentum gathered.
So the radio started to have a direct dialogue in some of these countries, like Poland, with their audience, which wasn't before. Did that change in a lot the policy, the editorial policy? Did it raise any special problems, like how do you deal with this live contact with your audience?
It was a new issue to have more direct input from the audience. There was always input because there were efforts to measure the audience indirectly with travelers, and there were letters. But now, first, the communist countries allowed direct dialing by telephone into Western Europe. So RFE-RL set up answering machines, and people could call in and leave whatever messages they want. So that was a kind of direct input that you hadn't had before. And you had praise, you had criticism of the programs, and you had to take that all into account. And if there were valid criticisms, respond to it as program suggestions. As something else that was new that never happened before, as the opposition and dissident groups arose in Eastern Europe, take Charter 77 here in the Czech Republic and then Czechoslovakia. Of course, RFE Czechoslovak service was covering the activities of Charter 77, Havel and all of his colleagues. But then in, I think it was in early 1989, Charter 77 sent a kind of official letter to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, with editorial suggestions as to how the program should be best formed, best shaped. So that's an input, and RFE and the director and staff of the Czechoslovak service and RFRL management had to consider all that. Obviously, you wouldn't just take all suggestions and implement them, but you'd think, well, here's something that's valuable that we hadn't thought about, let's do it, or this is a crazy idea, we won't do it. It was a new kind of input that didn't exist before 1989.
And when did the radio start having their first correspondence in one of these countries, like in Poland or Hungary?
It was in 1988 in Hungary, yeah. And Mr. Kassa went to Hungary, and he did an interview with one of the communist leaders, the reform communists. This was controversial for some of the staff, and indeed before, as this was being considered, we have actually in the archives a letter from most of the Hungarian broadcasters thinking it would be ill-advised to have correspondence in the country because they might be unduly influenced by the regimes. Now, that was okay, that was a bit alarmist, and in any case, the radios moved into these countries. The interview and the reporting from Hungary. And then in Poland, in the summer of 1989, when President Bush made his visit to Poland, the chief Polish service commentator and former director traveled to Poland and reported on that trip. Got a visa, a journalist visa, and traveled to Poland. So it started then, and then it mushroomed, because already in the fall of 1989, RFL could set up a bureau in Budapest. And by the end, I would say by early 1990, almost all the programming was being generated from the bureau in Budapest, from freelancers and others who were stationed there.
So the bureau in Budapest was opened before the end of communism in Central and Eastern Europe.
Before the fall of the Berlin Wall and before the Velvet Revolution in the Czech Republic. That's right, in the fall. And of course, one of the things that editorial policy for all the services emphasized during those crucial years was what was called cross-reporting, to tell the Romanian audience what was happening in Hungary and in Poland, and to tell the Czech audience what was happening around them. And so all that was very important lead up to, and this bureau in Budapest played a crucial role, I think, in all that.